Hello, this is Michael Azarad, Editor-in-Chief of the Talkhouse, and welcome to the Talkhouse Music Podcast. Hiss Golden Messenger's most recent album, Lateness of Dancers, came out in the autumn of 2014 and found the songwriting process of frontman MC Taylor still evolving, which is kind of cool after 4 albums. He's obviously thinking a lot about the craft and inspiration involved, so it's no surprise that songwriting process was the main thing he talked about with Jim James. Who fronts My Morning Jacket, whose new album The Waterfall came out this spring. James also made a stunner of a solo album a couple of years ago called Regions of Light and Sound of God. My Morning Jacket brings in some disparate outside influences, prog-rock and disco for instance, while Hiss Golden Messenger mostly keeps it local, with roots in country rock, folk, and southern R&B. But both musicians make their acclaimed music with a pronounced southern flavor. They have much in common, and they're fans of each other's work, which is what brought them together for this edition of the Talkhouse Music Podcast. First, James and Taylor remind us once again what a small musical world this is by revealing a show their two bands played together a long time ago. Then these two guys start in on some very basic questions, like, how do you write a song? What comes first, music or lyrics? Those are cliché interviewer questions, but when one songwriter asks another songwriter, you're bound to get some interesting answers, and James and Taylor both oblige. And even these two successful, highly praised songwriters confess to self-doubt, and being intimidated by the prospect of making music in the shadow of giants like the Beatles and Bob Dylan. They even acknowledge that often they don't completely grasp the impact of their own songs. There's only one thing that eventually allows them to do that, but we'll let them explain it. So here it is, the Talkhouse Music Podcast with Jim James of My Morning Jacket and MC Taylor of Hiss Golden Messenger. The two spoke via Skype while both were on tour, Taylor in Toronto and James in Niagara Falls, New York.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Michael. What's going on?
Not too much, man. How are you?
I'm good. It's a beautiful day up here in near Niagara Falls.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think, as it turns out, when we were driving over here, it occurred to us in the van that we probably could have met somewhere to do this because we're so close to each other.
Where are you?
We're in Toronto.
Oh, are you really? Did you go to Niagara Falls this morning?
No, we came in from Detroit yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, are you guys playing there tonight? Did you already do the show there?
No, yeah, we're playing here tonight at the Art Park Amphitheater. Not the Aardvark, but the Art Park.
Great. Okay, so I think that what we're talking about today is process, songwriting process, and I suspect that this conversation will ramble all over the place. But maybe that is the foundation on which we build this conversation.
Cool.
If you're okay with that. So both of us are songwriters. You write songs for My Morning Jacket, of course. I write songs for under the name Hiss Golden Messenger. And I am always very excited to talk to someone else that has approached their craft in a really deliberate way, like it seems you have. You've been doing this for so long.
Yeah, it feels like a long time.
I mean, it's a long time. It's so
we've been doing it about the same amount of time, right? I mean,
we have been doing it about the same amount of time. In fact, we didn't talk about this when we just did those shows together, but do you remember playing a record store in Denton, Texas in maybe 2001?
I do. What's that place called?
I don't know. Is it still there?
I'm seeing it in my mind, but I'm bad with names. I've got a Swiss cheese mind when it comes to names.
Yeah, so do I. Well, anyway, that was My Morning Jacket and my old band, Court and Spark, together.
Yeah, I remember playing with Court and Spark.
Yeah. So that was...
Did you do other shows too, or just that?
Oh, we might have, but that's the one that I really remember. And right. I think that there was maybe 10 people there.
Yeah, or less.
Or less. I mean, yeah, if we take the band members out, maybe less.
Yeah.
So I want to start by asking you this, a very general question. How do you write a song? What do you do? What's your process?
It's a good question. It's weird for me. It's like a two-part process because I'll find I just get, and I'm curious to see how this works for you because I know it's different for everybody. But I get a message from the universe or from God or whatever you want to call it. I get a song in my head, and sometimes it's just a melody. I'd say maybe 70-80% of the time it's just a melody and a beat. There's some kind of beat going and there's some kind of melody, and I'll pull out. It's always at the most inopportune time. So I'll
Yeah.
pull out my cell phone and pretend like I'm going to the bathroom or whatever and just sing it into my phone so I don't forget it. Because I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that part right there for me is the most important part. Because I feel like if you don't take the time to write it down or record that initial idea, it's gone forever.
Yep, yep.
Because when I listen back, so I'll get that initial idea, and then I'll have a process where I just go back and start digging through the ideas. And I mean, you probably have had this experience too, where you hear the idea and you're like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I recorded that because I never would have remembered that again. It would have been gone forever."
I think sometimes I have the inverse of that experience as well, which is you get very excited, you sneak into the bathroom and record your voice memo, which I have done so much of.
Yep.
And then you listen back to it a couple weeks later and you can't make, usually it's just, I can't make heads or tails of what it is, what the melody is I'm trying to sing. I was too close to the microphone, or it just, I lost it.
Yes, or it's too quiet. Like sometimes, like if my girlfriend's asleep or whatever, and I sneak off into the bathroom to try and record the message, I'm singing super quiet. I'll listen back to some of those, and I'll be like, "Oh man, I wish I would have sung it a little bit louder."
Right.
But yeah, it's like once I get those things, then it's like this whole other process of, you listen back to them, and maybe one inspires you on a certain day, and then some lyrics start popping out, or some other ideas start popping out, or some of them I feel like kind of go in this bin where I maybe won't work on them for years, 5 or 6 years or whatever, and then you'll find one. Or I like to uh, just listen to all the audio on my phone on random, so it'll be playing, it'll play a song, I don't know, Bob Marley or something, and then the next one that comes up will be a voice demo from 6 years ago that I'll be
Right.
like, oh man, that's cool. And then I'll, remember that and try and work on that.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. So when you get asked the inevitable question of, do you write the words or the music first? How do you respond to that?
For me,
That's been an evolving answer for me.
Well, for me, it's pretty much 90% of the time it's music first, and maybe two or three words. Maybe just a couple of words that are what would become the chorus of the song or the main idea, and then it's different. Some songs I'll write pages and pages and pages and pages of words that'll be whittled down to not that many words, or other times it'll just be a few words. I also like thinking about it sometimes as a puzzle, like an almost illogical or abstract word puzzle, where it's like I have this melody that I like, or I have this instrumental section that I like, but I don't really have anything to say, or I don't necessarily want to convey any lyrical message. So I'll try and build some kind of word puzzle that I like the way the words sound together, but they might not necessarily mean anything, but they would mean different things to different people.
Right. Right.
What about
Okay.
you?
Well, my process is generally, I think it might be a little labor intensive, but I'm usually working on words and music at the same time. I mean, like, my songs feel like so rhythmically based that I'm usually just fussing with like, honestly, syllable content. Like, what is the word here that covers the syllables that I need to make this rhythm work properly?
Right.
So and sometimes the words come really fast, and sometimes the words, you feel like they're almost never going to come.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like, sometimes there are songs that I feel like I had to settle because that's as close cosmically as I could get to what the emotion of the song seemed to be. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it, so I had to just sing what I had.
Yep. And sometimes that's a buzzer beater thing where you're literally doing it right as you're, recording your, the final song or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there are those tunes that just sort of come out of the sky, and it's like, this song is, here you go. Here's the song for you, and here's all the verses and choruses, and it's going to come in 15 minutes.
It's so weird. Yeah. It's so weird. Do you ever find it's helpful to, because I'll find, like, sometimes if I've got, I don't know, half the words or something to a song, if we play it, if we just sit around and play it, just by singing gibberish sometimes, that will make the rest of the words come. You know what I mean? Yeah. Do you ever have that experience?
I totally have that. And I have this other experience that is kind of similar where, if I have a song demoed out and I had to just mumble my way through some verses, if I just make a recording of it and then play it on repeat in the house, like, the words start to appear like specters. Like, what was I saying there? Oh, wait a second. That actually sounds like I'm saying, X. That works with the tune.
Oh yeah, I do that all the time. And also sometimes I will listen to foreign music like Thai or Vietnamese or whatever, and listen to what they're saying, which I obviously don't understand, but interpret it to be English, and getting really inspired by that sometimes.
Okay, so can I ask you, can I go like into a specific song of yours, just because I personally, from a very selfish point of view, would love a little background on this tune, and it's my absolute favorite from your new record. It's Compound Fracture.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell me about that tune? Do you remember when you came up with the original idea?
I do, yeah. That one's kind of a good example of one that evolved over, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, because I came up with the kind of initial riff of the song when I lived in the last apartment I lived in before where I live now, and it was kind of a soft acoustic thing, and I just kind of had the compound fracture, got to set the bone line. I had been through an injury and was just thinking about how so many times with an injury or a surgery or even not a physical injury, a breakup or whatever, there's so many times you just have to set the bone and don't walk on it and let it heal on its own, because there's nothing you can do. You can't force it. Only time can heal some wounds, and everybody knows that, but I think that's really difficult to remember. You kind of want to speed up the healing. You want it to rush. You want to be better now, but you can't. And only time can make that better. And I think people have to learn that in their own way, whether that's through a breakup or whether that's through a broken leg or whatever it is. And just kind of thinking about that and thinking about society too, how do we heal the wounds in society? How do we heal the wounds of racism and, all these things we've been battling for so long? Can time heal those wounds? It seems like we see progress and we see hope, and then we see terrible setbacks, and it's like I don't know. I think part of music is trying to call attention to that and call attention to just the conversation. Like we need to keep having these conversations over and over again, because I feel like it is possible for humanity to evolve and for humanity to heal and for us to all be on the same level, for people to realize that all of these things that we're taught that make us so different are really just illusions. And at the end of the day, everybody is the same. Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to be loved and to love. The songs, I don't know, I feel like a lot of my songs are about a lot of different things, but I guess just the opening line of the song about sounding a warning of what's to come. We could have paradise, or we could have an untimely death if we keep destroying the world and destroying each other.
Yeah, when Saturday comes, I'm gonna lose myself. Yeah, when Saturday comes, I'm like everybody else. I might get a little crazy. I'm gonna drink some whiskey.
How much of yourself, like what does that negotiation look like with songwriting for you in terms of how much of yourself you put into your songs? Now, like, that question may be asking like how much is autobiographical, but I think there's more to it than that. Like, what sort of engagement are you looking for with your songs when you write them?
I think at the end of the day, I am kind of irrelevant in my songs. I mean, my songs, some of them come from direct personal experience, but at the end of the day, like, I'm trying to think of a way to say it that doesn't just sound silly, but at the end of the day, I like to think of like every living being as having the same root system or something. It's like there's roots growing out of all of our feet into the ground, and there's this massive connection, that we all connect through the ground and through the sky. I really believe we're all connected. So the things that you say that resonate with me because I am you, and the things that I say that resonate with you because you're me. And I really believe that's the biggest part of the human experience, is trying to remember that, that's a very real thing. So I mean, something that happens to me personally in my personal life, I try to write about it in as non-detailed of a way as I can, so that there's no particular name or date stamp on it, so that hopefully it could be relevant to anyone at any time, and I try to think about that, even in terms of gender or things like that. Like, I like to sing about love in a way that isn't referring to a man or a woman, because I like to think about anybody who's in love with a man or a woman or whatever, being able to identify with the song.
Right.
So I try to write about it in a very personal but a very non-detailed way.
Right. Yeah. And have you arrived at this place through songwriting, or was this part of you before you started writing songs?
That's a good question. I think it's probably part of me. I mean, I think that's the greatest thing about, I think people like to talk about the bad things about growing older, which there are plenty. Your body deteriorates and all that stuff. But I think there's a lot of good things about growing older, and, just learning more and being more aware and trying to learn from your mistakes, and, just kind of, I don't know, just trying to be more open to the fact that we're really not alone, and that everybody's really pretty much going through the same thing. It's like we're all going through the same thing. And I definitely think songwriting has made me become more and more aware of that, because you also, I can be a pretty self-conscious person, and hold your own work up against your hero's work or whatever, and feel like, oh man, is my stuff even worth listening to? It's like you can listen to Bob Dylan sing about these things, and he does it so much better than me. It's like you can get into these wormholes of self-doubt and stuff, but then at the end of the day, you try to think, well, I'm grappling with it just like anybody else is grappling with it, so maybe there's somebody out there that feels similarly to the way I do, so hopefully it's all worthwhile at the end of the day.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you get in that wormhole? Do you feel like, do you get self-consciously comparing your work to other people's work?
I think it feels sometimes unavoidable. I feel like it's the very strong and confident artist that can walk through this world that you and I are both in and not experience a little bit of self-doubt. I mean, I can definitely, in terms of my relationship to my musical influences and the records that I hold really dear or hold as models for what I do, I find myself, particularly during like the writing and recording process, not referencing them the ways that I did when I was younger.
Right.
I feel like there was a time when I had just started playing music for real and was making records in a studio that we were always putting on the albums that we loved, both to reference the like sort of sonic aesthetic, but also in hopes of like figuring out how they did it and hopefully trying to grab a piece of that. And that's something that I never do anymore.
Yeah. I can't. That's something that I feel like I can't do, because, I feel like that was a thing maybe you do a little bit when you're younger, but for me it was almost like I don't want the pressure of knowing that my guitar sound is not going to sound like George Harrison or what. You know what I mean? It's like you can't. You kind of. That's the weird thing about recording too, is like the air. I always think about the air in recordings and the time period, and it's like you can get the same guitar, the same amp, the same mic, the same preamp, every single thing. You can get the exact same thing that they used to record George Harrison's guitar, but you don't have the time. You don't have the sound of the air of 1968 or whatever going through the sound, so it's not going to sound the same.
I love that. I think that's totally true. And I think that I suspect that you've experienced this too. It's like after making a certain number of albums, if you have found the niche that you are comfortable inhabiting, then you kind of know what your sounds are going to be. You can stretch those boundaries however way you need to, but just less and less. I'm not going to reference a Bob Dylan record because I'm not making a Bob Dylan record. I'm making a Mike Taylor, a His Gold Messenger record.
Totally.
And I don't know. That was a lesson that took me a long time to learn. Actually, longer than most, I suspect.
Definitely.
So, yeah. No, it's an interesting art. There's some black magic there.
It is weird too. I mean, I just feel like it's a mix, because a lot of times I do feel happy and confident, and it's like, and I just love playing music. So it's like just the act of playing or recording in itself is so great. It's like, it's like just such a weird head trip. I think really for anybody in any industry, because you're kind of getting. I feel like in our industry, when you're out on the road, touring, and there's just so much other music out there, and I feel like for whatever reason, our generation is kind of positioned after this generation of all the giants, of
right.
the Beatles and Glenn all the giants that it's like, sometimes you want to just kind of scream at people and say, okay, we've listened to enough Beatles, we've listened to enough Dylan, give somebody else a chance for a while.
Yeah.
But, those things are, it's kind of like saying don't breathe or don't drink water, because that music is so essential. But
yeah. I do wonder if, for instance, my kids are going to have they're going to develop the same relationships to music that I had to my parents' record collection. So much is different about that whole equation now, but I just wonder what my children's relationship to music is going to look like.
Right.
I mean, a big part of that, or an interesting aspect of that, for me, is that so much of my music actually comes from my parents' time.
Oh yeah.
I have a ton of contemporary music too, but I have to say a good 75% of our listening time at home with the family is stuff that actually comes from my parents' generation. So we're talking about when my kids are fully grown and making their own decisions out on their own, the music that they were listening to growing up is going to be closing in on 80, 100 years old.
I know, yeah, isn't that insane?
It's just it's hard to wrap your mind around.
Well, it makes you wonder, because there's certain things, you think about whatever Beethoven, or, you think people will be listening to Beethoven forever. Then you think about the touchstones like The Dark Side of the Moon, people will be listening to that record forever. And then you think about like Nina Simone. It's like there will never be another Nina Simone, so people will always be listening to Nina. It's like it does kind of for me get elemental, because it's like Nina Simone is like water to me. It's like I can't imagine not having her music to draw from. So yeah, it's like if your kids grow up listening to whatever has inspired you, it's not like that's ever gonna go away. It's
right.
Like you're never not gonna want to listen to whatever it is that you listen to. But then I wonder, what are the touchstones of our generation, and will those be as permanent because of the way music is so fragmented now, and it's like it all exists in the air. There's those of us that care about vinyl and we press vinyl, and there is some semi-permanence to what we do, but so much of it just exists in this void where it's all free now, and it's like you don't even have to steal it anymore. It's on Spotify. It's all streaming. It's like totally socially acceptable for it to be free. So I wonder if we will retain the weight, you know what I mean, the weight and permanence, because there's so many, whatever Bob Dylan EPs, LPs, physically all over the earth from a time when they pressed millions and millions and millions of vinyl discs. There's just not physically. I keep having these visions of all the power going out, and we have no more internet and we have no more electricity, but still there are these, carts that ride around from time to time with Victrolas or whatever that can play, normal records, and, so you can still listen to anything that was pressed on vinyl. We'll go back to every single campfire has 32 copies of Fleetwood Mac Rumors, and maybe there's one My Morning Jacket record, in all of North America or whatever that you might be able to listen to.
Sure. Okay, so let me, I think we're getting close to the end here, but let me ask you this question. If you could point to a song in your catalog from your entire life of songwriting, as one that you feel like you kind of got it. It doesn't have to be. Man. It doesn't have to be the one, but I'm just asking if it happens to be a song that comes to your mind that you feel like that was pretty close to what I've been wanting to do.
That's tough. I kind of go through the patterns of, we call it the doghouse, where certain songs go into the doghouse for me, and it's like one week I totally hate the song, and then the next week, for whatever reason, I totally love it. It's the same thing. I'm trying to think of one that has never entered the doghouse. Maybe there's a song called "The Way That He Sings" from our second record, and that's one that I feel like throughout the course of the band's history, I've never really grown tired of playing, because I feel like it serves a lot of what I'm looking to serve in music in general, because I feel like it's got, I really like the melody, and I feel like at the end it gets pretty explosive and rocks, and I feel like it's, got a bit of a message, at least for me, of just kind of loving something because of the way that it feels, and not even knowing how to explain it. I kind of wrote it about just loving the way that a person sings, not because of the words that they're saying or the band playing behind them, but there's just something about the voice that rings true to my soul, and just trying to write about how that feels. Or with love, I kind of talk about that a little bit too, of just, why do I love this person? I don't know. Right. It's not because of really anything in particular that they said, or even the way that they look. That is all part of it, but there's a deeper thing behind it that I don't understand, but you just know if it feels right or if it doesn't.
You're sweet and sexy, but so robotic. What do you want me to do? Make all the big decisions for you. 'Cause I can't.
Just to make a quick digression, really, because you were talking about the way that someone sings, even if it's hard to put a finger on what it is that's compelling, still being an emotional experience. And I know that both of us knew Jason Molina, who's a great songwriter. What was your relationship to his music?
Man, his music, his voice that's kind of exactly what I was talking about. His voice I almost think of it like a tunnel. It's like when you heard his voice, it's like you're going down this tunnel, and I feel like obviously a lot of what he dealt with was darkness. You at least for me, I always hoped that the tunnel was leading somewhere bright for him. I always hoped that through what he was trying to convey, that would solve his riddle. And who knows? Maybe on some other dimension or some other place he has solved his riddle. But I think the Magnolia Electric Company record is just one of the best records ever made, especially anybody of our generation ever made. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like we all try the best we can, and we all make work that we're proud of, and then we make work that we look back on 5 or 10 years later and we're like, maybe I could have done that song better, or but I think there's these moments when everything comes together and everything is right, and I feel like that Magnolia Electric Company record is just, for me, that was his moment when all the bits came together and everything was just unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree. That's like a sort of testament to our time of people that we know making music. That was a record where that was like, yeah, they did it, they got it.
Yeah. How well did you know Jason?
I didn't know him super well. We toured together and we stayed in touch off and on over the years. I was in touch a little bit with him at the end. There were many people that knew him much better than I did. But I thought of him as a friend. I mean, we spent a lot of time together, and he was an inspiration. You know, just to watch the way that he walked through his musical world was, you know, he did it with seeming confidence. I don't know if he had the sort of dark nights of the soul with music. I suspect he probably did, but I don't know. He found his thing early, and he just kept at it.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I think about so much now, and I think in part because I watched him do it, was not to, you know, there's that sweet spot with a song where you don't want to overwrite it. You want it to get to that place where it feels done, but you want to leave a little bit of room to move, because if you're going to live with it for the rest of your performing life, you need to allow the song to grow with you.
Absolutely.
And I feel like he did
Isn't that
really.
a weird thing?
That's the biggest part of the sort of like black magic for me, is like figuring out how much to leave undone.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even up to you. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, all the best examples of that happening in my own musical life have had nothing to do with me, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
well,
whatever.
yeah, it's so weird.
And whatever planning
Go ahead,
whatever plans I tried to make in terms of like leaving room to grow had nothing to do with how the song actually came out.
I know. It is so weird.
Yeah.
So weird. I think of it like seeds, you know, it's like, because I feel like if you make a record, I'm sure you feel this way, you know, same way I do every time I make a record. It's like you put everything into it. You know, you put 110% into the record, and you finish the record, and, you know, whatever X number of months later it comes out, and then you're playing it. And then, yeah, the songs start to grow and they start to change, you know, and maybe a year later you're kind of like, oh man, I wish we would have known that before we made the record. But that's kind of like the beauty of it. It's almost like you can't know it. You can only know it through time, you know. I guess to come full circle back to what we were talking about earlier, it's like some things can only be known through time, and you can't rush them, you know, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah. I love it, man. Well, hey, this has been really great to talk to you. And,
absolutely, yeah.
Well, thank you, brother. I hope you guys have a great show tonight. And we'll talk soon. I'll probably see you in Newport.
Yeah. Safe travels.
Yeah, you too, man.
One day I tried to move. Oh, I tried to move, but I could not. They said go to the holy house, and I took a long way around. Oh, I'll teach you, come teach me.
And that's it for this edition of the Talkhouse Music Podcast. Thanks to our producer-engineers Mark Yoshizumi and Elia Einhorn. For more Talkhouse Music podcasts, by all means visit our SoundCloud page or subscribe to our podcasts on iTunes. And to read smart, notable musicians writing about new music, please do visit thetalkhouse.com/music.